Hi, welcome back. My name is Devraj. Today I want to talk a bit about adding tarot to a bioenergetics practice or similar body-based therapy type of practice. Because I've been doing this quite a lot recently and I want to share a bit my understandings that I've gathered. And because on the surface of it, these look like entirely separate things. So I wanted to address that in this video, look at some of the reasons why we might want to add tarot, what the benefits of it are. And secondarily, also to explain a good way of doing this. I made a video the other day, opening the body with the cube of space, a guided practice. And I thought afterwards, it needs a bit more explanation of how to do this because it's a little bit intricate, the technique, until you get the hang of it. But first of all, why would we add tarot visualization, which means learning to build up the key in our mind's eye? Why would we add that to a bodywork practice, to bioenergetics? Well, there's an assortment of reasons I can think of, one of which is psychological and the others of which are more esoteric. And the psychological reason relates to the work of Carl Jung. Whatever you think about him, I'm not always a massive fan. I haven't read tons and tons of Carl Jung. But nevertheless, a very significant character in the world of psychology and also in the world of esotericism and in the kind of alternative world in general. And one of the cornerstone concepts that Jung came up with was the idea that the unconscious mind is both shared, a collective unconscious, that we all share an unconscious mind. Obviously a fairly radical idea in today's world, which is kind of hyper-secular. And secondarily, that the unconscious mind is symbolic in nature. It's full of symbols. And one of the things you'll see when you look at tarot keys, here's the Wheel of Fortune, here's a heap more tarot keys. One of the things you'll see is that they're rammed full of symbols. This key, for example, lurking in there basically are this Sphinx character, and then there's this kind of snake descending, and this character of Hermanubis coming up, his ears coming up above the center line. You've got some alchemical symbols in here. You've got 4 astrological houses represented here, which are stations of a fixed cross from Gnosticism, plus a heap of other bits and bobs going on. And this is normal with all of the 22 keys, as they're called, of the Tarot Major Arcana. And it's not that you necessarily need to understand what these symbols are and be able to talk about them, articulate them. It's more that on an unconscious level, your mind knows these symbols. They're already sitting there in the unconscious mind. And so when you start to visualize tarot, by that I mean, you become familiar with the 22 keys and you start to be able to build them up in your mind and you practice that, which can be quite grueling for me because I don't consider that I'm naturally good at working with my mind's eye. It's really like kind of being down a visual gym or something, pumping weights. It's really tough for me personally. But when you do that, you anchor your psyche very deeply in the unconscious mind because these symbols exist there already. When I first got into Kabbalah and tarot work back in the late 90s, I had some very powerful experiences with the tarot keys, and it was clear they were pulling me really deep inside. These days when I look at the world, and it's a bit like modernity, it's kind of a vast garbage heap basically onto which we're thrown, and we just have to somehow orient ourselves and make the best of it, and try and get some money, some work, friendships, some self-development, maybe a lover or a partner, but it's not easy, and there's just myriad distractions and nonsense everywhere. It really is to me like a bit of a garbage heap. And then how do you actually orient yourself? How do you ground yourself? How do you get access to some of the energy that's in your body? And tarot for me has worked like this. It has worked to anchor me in the deep unconscious. And because of that, the subsidiary psychological benefit that you get is it kind of stirs up energy from deep inside. If you're familiar with body-based therapy and bioenergetics and stuff and Reichian work, there's this kind of idea that our unconscious mind or our mind in general, it's just full of repressed emotions. It's full of blocked energy and this kind of thing. It's like a pipe that's just filled with crud. And grounding yourself deep at the bottom of this pipe, it tends to move stuff out, rather like a bit of drain cleaner. Creating this connection in the deep unconscious stirs stuff up, so you get processing from it. So these are some for me, very valid psychological benefits that you can get from learning to work with tarot and doing so on a regular basis in conjunction with a bodywork practice. Then on the more esoteric level, which may or may not be your interest, when you're working constantly with these symbols in your mind, and you're just getting them, you're creating this connection with the deep unconscious, it's rather like you're starting to run a program deep inside of you. It's a bit like, downloading, you want to get Uber app on your phone because you want to travel around, you download it from the App Store or Google Play, and then you run the program in your phone, and then you can use the program. And there's something a bit similar. I don't think I could really articulate it perfectly, going on with tarot. I build these symbols up once a day, and each time I do it, it feels like, there's some program that's starting to run actually inside my body. It's creating subtle changes somehow. And the kind of things that it's typically believed to change is like changing the flow of Kundalini energy in the body, or awakening and increasing it a bit. And also changing how your body absorbs sunlight from food. Because food contains sunlight. Mostly it passes out of the body. This is an old alchemical theory, and it's all a bit esoteric, but the idea is that you can get the sunlight into your bloodstream if you can create subtle changes in your gut through using these symbols as a program. And then, your bloodstream becomes more light, you become a bit enlightened, essentially. So this is a bit more esoteric and a bit more out there, and it might not be your thing, but I put it in there as well. And with both, and something to understand here, with both of these kind of uses, psychological or esoteric, you don't consciously need to do very much. You don't need to understand the symbols, really. I mean, it's kind of useful because it engages your mind a bit in the symbols and the attributions to other symbol sets, but you don't have to have a big intellectual mind to do this. It's more like you're using your mind as a channel, as just a channel to plant something. Planting it in your unconscious mind where it already exists, and so activating a connection. So that's also interesting to me because in many ways with bioenergetics we're doing something similar. We're bypassing the kind of thinking egoic mind, of all its opinions about everything all the time, and just going straight kind of to where the action is. In therapy the action is in the body. That's where repressed emotions are held. That's where energy blocks are mapped out inside the body. So you don't have to go through the thinking mind. It's nice to go through the thinking mind a bit as well, and develop an understanding of classical psychology and how it applies to you and your life. But you don't, in order to heal and to get more energy and emotion flowing in your body, you don't necessarily have to go on a long story about all what your mother did to you and what you expected, and your dad, he was so like this, and blah, 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 your teachers. There's nothing wrong with doing that stuff, but you can cut out the middleman in body-based therapy and just start to work directly on the body, because that's where all the issues are mapped. So in like manner with tarot, it doesn't really matter. I might not like this key. I might think a different version of this key is much better, or I might just hate the look of it anyway. That doesn't really matter. As long as it contains the symbols in it that can be activated in the unconscious mind, and I just learn to build it up in my mind, I'm bypassing this constant kind of egoic judgment for facility that's in the mind, and I'm going direct in. So this is also attractive if you're into body-based therapy, because it doesn't get too caught up in the mind. Okay, so having discussed the value of adding tarot to a bodywork practice, let's take a look at how you might do that. Because like I said, I made a video which is a guided practice, but then I thought afterwards, it doesn't really contain proper details of how to do it. So the first thing you're going to need, fairly obviously, is a set of tarot keys. I use this set, which is from the builders of the Adytum, and were made about 100 years ago, which I came across, kind of intuitively back in the late 90s. And it was an esoteric school of Western mystery tradition that is very tarot heavy. So I do really recommend these keys. You can find them online. You can find them on my website, the devaraj.org.uk website listed in the description. And you can just download them. Or you can get a book by the founder of the order, Dr. Paul Foster Case. It's called Tarot, A Key to the Wisdom of the Ages. Now, you might be attracted to another deck, and that's fair enough, but something I'll just mention here, as I said earlier, it's not really what your egoic mind thinks about the keys. The main thing is that they have the symbols in them that can activate in your unconscious mind. So I just mentioned that. These are my preference. Now, back to the practice. So with a daily practice like this, or a weekly practice, or monthly practice, or whatever you want, I recommend that before you sit down and do this kind of visualization meditation practice, you do a bit of body work, do some bioenergetics, some bow and arch, that kind of thing. I personally like a 5-position sequence that I put out earlier this year, something like May. I think I made the video on my body-based therapy channel. I usually do that, 3 rounds of that before I start. It takes about 22 minutes. And that just gets the body more open and gets some energy flowing already, because when you're doing visualization, you're also working with energy. If there's more energy in your body, it will go deeper. So you've done your practice, you sit down somewhere just to quietly meditate, eyes closed. Generally after the practice, I give myself 2 or 3 minutes because my mind is kind of busy. I'm feeling my body and energy is kind of moving and swirling around, maybe just to settle down a little bit. It doesn't always settle down a little bit, and I just start. But then what I do is build up each tarot key in turn for maybe a minute each in my mind's eye, and then place it on a glyph that I kind of build around myself called the cube of space. And this might sound complicated, but it's actually not that complicated. And the cube of space is an old Kabbalistic glyph, and it's really just a kind of very basic map of 3-dimensional existence. The cube, we live in this world of 3 dimensions plus time, and the cube is the symbol of 3 dimensions. It's got 3 axes. So the cube is like the most basic emblem or glyph of our 3-dimensional realm. And what we're going to be doing in this visualization technique is imagining ourselves seated inside a cube. And then the handy thing about a cube is that it has in total, or certainly one way of looking at it, 22 attributes. It's got 3 axes, it's got 6 faces, it's got a center point, or you can imagine it's got a center point, and it's got 12 edges. And 3 plus 6 plus 1 plus 12 equals 22. So we can assign one of our tarot keys to each of these attributes of the cube of space. And this serves 2 functions in that one, it kind of gives it like a handy place to put them inside your mind. And it also means you're building up this cube of space, which is an old Kabbalistic thing from 1,000 or 2 years ago. And so to get to the practicalities, now sitting down, you imagine yourself seated inside a cube where you just see the bare bones of it, the 12 edges of it. And the cube is perhaps 2 or 3 meters wide, about 10 foot wide. You don't need to make it super big. Part of this exercise is to give you an increased sense of your boundaries. You imagine yourself seated in the middle of it, so you've got like the 6 faces of the cube around you, the front face, back face, left, right, above, below. And then you've got the 3 axes of the cube inside you, so to speak, one running above to below, going through your body. One running from front to back, going through, you can imagine it going through your solar plexus, and another going from side to side, left to right, also through the solar plexus. And then the idea is that from working first with the axes, then the faces and the center point, and then the edges, we're going to take the tarot key that's assigned to that position out, visualize it in our mind's eye, and then put it back. That's the whole basic concept. And we're going to do each one for about a minute each. And then in between each one, with eyes closed, we try to look at the back of our head, which is essentially impossible, but trying to do so kind of puts your mind in neutral, so you have a little neutral space for a couple of seconds before you work with the next key. So hopefully that's fairly clear. I'll now quickly go through how it works, so that hopefully it's like super clear how you do this visualization. We start with the 3 axes and with the one that goes from above to below. With the keys that are assigned to the axes and to the edges, you imagine they're like a rolled up scroll to begin with when they're inside, when they're in the cube structure. So it's like a scroll that's been rolled up from the edges, from the sides, so the scroll has the same length as the key. You're not rolling up from top to bottom. And so with the first axis, the above to below, you imagine you're pulling this scroll out from the top of your head and then unfolding in front of you without inverting it. And that one is key 0, the Fool. Let's just take a quick look at it as the first one. And you try to build that up in your mind's eye for about a minute, and then you roll it back up the way it was and you put it back. And then you go into neutral for a couple of seconds, and then you move on to the next axis. And that's essentially all we're going to be doing with each key. Now, this business of trying to build them up in your mind's eye, obviously if you're not familiar with the keys, you need to look at the key for a little bit and then give it a crack, trying to build it up. If you are familiar with the keys, maybe you can do it without looking at the key to start with, just building it up in your mind's eye. I find it very difficult. I find it quite grueling, to be honest, and it really brings out my inner critic like crazy. I'm just like, oh my God, you did it so much better yesterday. You're getting nowhere with this practice. Just give up now. And today you can only do that little bit of its arms or something like that. I've got that constant inner dialogue, but I just stick with it and keep trying. And I do notice at times it really seems to shift stuff almost in my unconscious mind as I try to, it's good to try and keep my mind relaxed when I do it, which is not easy because I easily tend to strain and try to kind of over focus. But when I do get little flashes of it inside, it also can pull stuff up from the unconscious. It's almost like you'll actually feel this connection when you make it to the deep unconscious, which is quite exciting. But like I say, it's quite a grueling practice. So let's just continue along quickly so you've really got the idea of how it goes. We've done our Fool, we've put him back inside, had a couple of seconds in neutral, and then the next one is this key that runs from in front to behind. So you pull that out from in front like a scroll, unroll it in front of you. That one's key 12, the Hanged Man. We can look at him quickly. Won't need to do all of them like this. Hanged Man, build that up in your mind's eye for a minute, roll him up, put him back. Go into neutral for a couple of seconds, and then the third axis from left to right, pull that key out, look at it, it's key 20, Judgment, roll it up, back he goes. And then we move on to the 6 faces and a center point. And notice, of course, that it's important that you do this in the right order because, it's a bit complicated, but they are assigned to these different areas of the cube for a purpose. So it's good to do it. Then you get the subsidiary benefits of not just building up the tarot keys, but also building up this cube of space, which is essentially to do with mastery of the three-dimensional realm. So with the faces, we start with above. Now you don't need to envisage the key as a scroll for this one. It can just be like a painting or a kind of carpet or something. So you pull it out from above, put it in front of you in your mind's eye. It's key 1, the Magician. Build it up for a minute and then place it back there. Then you move on to the below, which is pull it out. It's key 2, the High Priestess. Put it back, go into neutral. The third one is right in front of you. You can lift it up. It's key 3, the Empress. Put it back. These are all listed in one of the links below, so you don't have to remember them all right now, by the way. The next face is behind you, so you pull it out, turn it around, look at it. It's key 10, the Wheel of Fortune. Put it back. Then the left, which is key 16, the Tower. And then the right, which is key 19, the Sun. And then you can do the center key, which is key 21, the World. And you can either imagine that as a kind of small kind of ball that you unfold, or just as a key that you put back in the center of you without making it into a scroll or anything else. And then having done the 3 axes and the 6 faces and the center point, we move on to the 12 edges. We're going to imagine that the keys are in scrolls around these 12 edges. But there's a slight complexity because obviously it could go in one of 2 directions. And the directions actually are important. So when you pull each one out, look at it and put it back, you need to get the direction right, essentially. And imagine that you may have to invert it if it's one that's upside down and you're pulling it out, you invert it to look, and then look at it and put it back in the same way. Now with the cube of space and the edges on the cube of space, because they've got this directionality, you don't need to check all this stuff out now, but essentially 2 of the 6 faces have a circular flow of energy in them, in that the direction of each key follows around. And those 2 faces are the front face and the above face. The other 4 faces don't do that. So there's 2 ways that you can build the edges up, and each has a slightly different psychological significance. If you build up the front face first, which means this key, then this key, this key, then this key, then this is more to do with opening to the world as it is and being present and being able to really, be resourceful in dealing with challenges that you face in your day-to-day life. And then if you start by opening the above face first, which is the 4 edges that go round like this, then that's more to do with getting spiritual insight or some kind of spiritual development. So you can decide before you start this practice whether you need more kind of day-to-day resourcefulness right now or you want more spiritual development. And then you begin these 12 edges in the manner that fits. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to briefly go through them so you get the idea, using opening from the front. But the keys and the directions are the same, it's just the sequence in which you do them. And for either of them, of course, you begin with the axis and the faces and the center point. Hopefully that's clear. So we're going to look at doing it from the front, but if you want to do it from the top, you can find the list on the link at the link below. So from the front left, and you're going to pull the scroll down and out, and then invert it and look at it. It's key 4. Put it back, mind into neutral. Next one is front and below. You pull it out to the right. It's key 7, the chariot. Put it back, mind in neutral. And then the next one is front to the right. You pull it out from above, because remember it's got a circular flow, this face. Pull it out, look at it, it's key 5, the Hierophant. Put it back, mind in neutral. And then front above, which is key 6, pull it out to the left, look at it, put it back. And then you work round, having done this face where the flow is circular, you work round. You notice when you get used to this stuff that the edges with their directions form certain shapes. And so what you do is you then open on the left hand side, the above, pulling the key backwards, which is key 8. And then also on the left hand side, the below, pulling it backwards again, which is key 9, the Hermit. And then behind you, above, pulling out to the right, is key 14, back he goes, mind in neutral. Behind you below is key 15, the Devil, pull him out, look at him, back he goes. And then to complete this kind of looping shape, on the right and above, pulling out to the front, key 17, the Star, back he goes, mind in neutral. And then on the right and below, it's key 18. Back it goes. And then because there's 2 edges we've missed out by doing it like this, we pick those up at the end. And those are behind you to the left, and the key is pointing downwards. So you pull it out in that direction. That's key 11. Back he goes. And then behind you to the right, pointing upwards, is key 13. So you pull that out from the above, look at it, and put it back. And at that point, you've done all 22 keys, you've done all 22 different aspects of the cube. So you're complete. And you just spend a few minutes just sitting and feeling your body, and then the meditation, the practice is over. Okay, so I've given you the version that's good for being more effective in the day-to-day world, the one that starts with the edges part, opening the 4 edges that surround the front face. If you want to do the exercise for more spiritual development, then you begin by opening the edges that surround the above face. And if you check the description below, you'll find a link to that one as well. In fact, a link to a page where the sequence for each is written out. Okay, so having made this video, I'm aware that it might all seem like extremely complicated and weird. Probably if I came across it for the first time, I'd certainly have that judgment. But if you are intrigued, do give it a go. Once you get used to it, it isn't so hard. And I do feel like this practice really does give people something on quite a deep level. All good? Feel free to check out my work on Amazon, the books I've written. Check out my courses on bodywork and similar at bioenergetics.org.uk. All of this stuff is listed in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, sticking to the end, and I'll see you again soon for some more content here on YouTube. Thank you.